with this year's Jeopardy. Hey guys, and welcome to Mission San Jose Relay for Life's Jeopardy event. We're all so excited to have you guys here with us today, and I can guarantee we'll all have an amazing time. To start us off, we'll be having a quick introduction of our sponsor for the event, which is the Asian American Donor Program, AADP. They have a mission of diversifying the bone marrow registry and helping patients with diseases such as blood cancer. So now I'll be handing it off to Megan to kind of give us a few words about AADP.
Yeah, for sure. So the Asian American Donor Program is dedicated to increasing the availability of potential stem cell donors for patients with life-threatening diseases that are curable by stem cell transplants. And they are a community-based nonprofit for social benefit. And this organization specialized in conducting outreach and donor registration drives in and with diverse communities, just like Mission. And they are also an official recruitment center for Be the Match, which is a donor registry that helps connect bone marrow donors with their recipients. And they are looking for more people between the ages of 18 and 44 to sign up as a stem cell and bone marrow donor to help patients diagnosed with blood cancers like leukemia and lymphoma, just to name a few. And so if any of your parents or relatives that you know are willing to donate, I'll give some information later on, but donating stem cells is actually really easy, and it's very similar to donating blood, and signing up is even easier. And all it takes to sign up is just like an online form and a cheek swab, and it takes 10 minutes for you to sign up. And your swab will be tested to see if your HLA type matches like a searching patient. And when they look for a match, the ethnicity is a key, and patients will most likely, they will match with a donor who shares their own background. And, you know, unfortunately, not everyone has an equal chance of finding a match because there are many underrepresented communities in the donor registry. So the more people that we get to sign up from diverse backgrounds, the more patients we can help. So I will text into the chat the text to join code to sign up for the registry if you know anyone that would be willing to join. Yeah. And we are also so thankful for our sponsor today. And by then they are providing a raffle prize for us. So they're providing an Echo Dot along with 2 Gongcha gift cards. And without further ado, let's get ready for today's event.
Yeah, thank you so much, Megan, for that amazing introduction of our sponsor, the Asian American Donor Program. Participants, if you guys would like to know more about AADP or know anyone who is willing to donate or join the bone marrow registry, you can check out their website at aadp.org. We'll be pasting all of this information into the Zoom chat and also emailing it out to all participants. So now let's get to the crux of today's event, which is our guest speaker presentation from Mary Kemp. She is a guest speaker from the American Cancer Society's Cancer Action Network. She'll be speaking about her work with ACS CAN, their current work with legislation regarding cancer and healthcare, and the importance of student involvement with cancer advocacy. So without any further ado, let's hand it over to Mary Kemp.
Thank you so much. I am really excited to be here with you virtually today. I want to be sure everyone can see my screen before I get started. Is that good? Yep. So my name is Mary Kemp. I do see a few familiar faces in the audience, which is exciting. I work for the American Cancer Society Cancer Action Network. I'm the Northern California Grassroots Manager and have been a part of the organization for 7 years. I originally started in the ACS side of the organization and was a community manager for the Boise State Relay for Life in Idaho. So working with college and high school students on this work is really exciting for me. And just together, the discussion around how ACS and ACS can work together to change the cancer journey for patients. And so I just want to kind of start by asking a question, and maybe you can throw a reaction up or post something in the chat. But I wondered how many of you are a part of this important work, fighting cancer, because you enjoy the camaraderie and the support you have found a group that understand you and your family's experience, or that have brought clarity to the many ways you can support your friends and community members along their cancer journey. So how many of you are part of this because you enjoy that, or it has given you tools for supporting others? Awesome. And I hope that you walk away from today's presentation having even more tools in your pocket and ways to support and help your community. So you can see here on the screen a few of the different ways that advocacy is happening in different communities, both in California and in the nation's capital. And while many of you are probably very familiar with the American Cancer Society and its over 100-year history of work toward eradicating cancer, the American Cancer Society Cancer Action Network is just celebrating its 20th anniversary this year. ACS CAN is the voice of cancer survivors, patients, and caregivers at every level of government. So we do local work, state work, and federal work. We don't do politics, so we don't support a particular candidate or oppose a particular candidate. What we do is we empower people to share their stories and to hold the lawmakers accountable. They will make decisions on a regular basis that will impact outcomes for cancer patients. And so we want people to feel that they have a part in that. For many people, you know, they look over the numbers on a spreadsheet as they're making decisions about policies they're going to vote on. But the key thing is the stories that they hear from their constituents. So you can see in this bottom corner picture, Emily Bailey is the young girl with the short blonde hair. She's traveled from California, from the Bay Area to Washington, D.C. to talk to her lawmakers about cervical cancer. And we do these type of advocacy opportunities very regularly. And I want to tell a little bit more about how ACS and ACS work together and sort of why ACS CAN was founded. In the 1990s, there were many women that were dying from breast cancer, and people were not sure why so many were being diagnosed with late stage diagnoses when we had mammograms. They had already been developed at that time. And as they did some research, they found that many women just were not going to get their mammograms because their insurance didn't cover it. And so during that time, the Breast Cancer Act was passed, and this required insurance companies to cover women's mammograms. And since that time, there's been a 34% decline in breast cancer deaths. And it goes to show how important screening and early detection of cancer is, and the impact that a policy can have at the large scale, the number of lives that it can touch. And so ACS and ACS CAN sort of operate as a two-wheeled bicycle. ACS does a lot of the work raising money for cancer research, educating the public about cancer, providing support to patients. And then ACS CAN is doing that work in the halls of government. We are educating lawmakers. We are bringing the stories of patients to them to ensure that they continue to make funding cancer research a priority at the federal level. And I'm going to share a little bit more important details about how important that is, but you can think of this like if we were just a unicycle, if ACS just operated on its own or ACS CAN operated on its own, we would still move forward and make progress, but we couldn't do it as fast as we can when we work together. So probably quite a few of you are familiar with the National Institutes of Health. Every year they invest about $41.7 billion in medical research, and they are the largest biomedical research agency in the world. The National Cancer Institute is a sub-agency within the National Institutes of Health. About 3,500 individuals are a part of that. And they do the sole work of, federal cancer research. In 2021, the federal government just passed the Consolidated Appropriations Act, and that is like their budget, coupled with the 21st Century Cures Act. And so they've pledged $6.56 billion to the National Cancer Institute this year. So I'm going to say that number again, $6.56 billion just this year, in this 1 year, toward cancer research. And the reason that's important is because even though the American Cancer Society raises a lot of money for cancer research, we've raised $5 billion since 1946. So in 1 year, the federal government spends more on cancer research than when we've been able to raise over, over 100 years. And that shows you why it's important. The way the two interact or operate with each other is that National Institutes of Health isn't going to fund innovative cancer research. They're only going to fund research that has been proven. And so what ACS does that is very, very unique is they fund innovative and brand new research that is coming out. And without ACS's support in this area, we wouldn't have many of the new cures and treatments that we have today. And so at that point, after ACS has funded the innovative research, the National Institutes of Health and the National Cancer Institute continue to fund that researcher for the length of their project. This graph shows over time what's happened with cancer research funding at the federal level. So if you look back to the year 2003, you can see that over time, the purchasing power of the National Institutes of Health has actually gone down because the biomedical research costs more and inflation, and the Congress had not set the same rate of increase in their budget toward the organization. And so over time, that's been a shortfall of over 3.6 billion. And the same thing has happened at the National Cancer Institute. It's even a little bit further shortfall relative to what they used to receive. And so this shows how important it is that we go talk to lawmakers about continuing to increase funding for the National Institutes of Health and the National Cancer Institute. While NCI is a big slice of the NIH funding, it used to be bigger. And so over time, what has happened is the amount of money that can be spent on cancer research has declined. And it's declined at a time when we have more innovative cancer research happening than ever in the history of the world. So the last thing that we want to see is those really innovative researchers' projects sitting on a shelf in a lab and not continuing because there isn't the funding for their project, or for brand new college students that have really innovative new work to begin on, being unable to fund their project and turning to another field instead when they have this brilliant idea. So we want to make sure that new cancer research is funded and that it's continued to be funded. And so this is where advocacy comes in or fits in. And I want to talk a little bit more about what that really entails. This is my family. I remember this moment. My family had come to watch me compete in the National Track and Field Championships. And that day I was the oldest competitor on the track at age 34. I went back to run in college, and my family surprised me showing up with these shirts on at the meet. And I was like sort of embarrassed, but also thought it was really cute. But it's something that's permanently stuck in my head, this very special moment. And a few years after this, my mom would be diagnosed with cancer. My mom ended up needing to do her treatment in St. Louis, which was over 100 miles from where they lived. And so she stayed at the Hope Lodge in St. Louis during the 7-week length of her treatment. And I got to go and be a part of that experience with her. And it was one of the most moving ways. It allowed me to understand the cancer journey in a way that no other could have. And I think as a patient, it's hard to articulate how being seriously ill feels in a profound way. My mom was very run down, but craved survival. She longed for her pain to end while appreciating the comfort and closeness of her family. And so with a lot of laughter and a lot of love, we made it through this very difficult time. And I'm happy to say that she beat her cancer. And this year we celebrated virtually 5 years cancer-free. So that was a big, exciting moment for us. But I know that part of that experience of being able, thank you, being able to stay in the Hope Lodge during her treatment made a significant difference. The connection she made with other patients there. And so the good work you're doing to raise funds for ACS goes to that important service. So my mom's cancer journey made it really clear to me how important it was to stand up for others. And I really believe that when someone is staring cancer in the face, they should have access to the best treatment that is available. When someone is staring cancer in the face, they shouldn't have to concern themselves with what insurance will or won't cover. When they're staring cancer in the face, we need to be staring our lawmakers in the face, telling them to do everything they can to make the journey easier. And changing the minds of very important and powerful people is critical. So this is how we do it, through our advocacy. And you can see in one of the pictures here, Aditya Indla, who is a student in Union City, a high school student, is advocating at his congressman's office. This is just before the pandemic. He stopped in to drop off some details about a bill that he was asking him to support, the Reversing Youth Tobacco Epidemic Act. And then on the left, you can sort of see what advocacy looks like in the world today. So you might see some faces you notice are familiar with in this image. In the middle row, second photo down, is Congressman DeSaulnier. And this is a group of students meeting with the congressman to talk about the importance of funding cancer research, among a number of other topics, and the value of advocacy. And Congressman DeSaulnier is a cancer patient himself right now, and so he fully understands the value in this, and it was great to partner with him in this way. So all of our work right now is virtual, which actually makes it a little easier for students to jump in. So many of our students are attending local city council meetings in the evening and testifying on issues. They are attending meetings with congressmen. We have a state cancer action day coming up in the beginning of April, and many students have meetings set with their state assembly members and their state senators to talk about 4 key issues that we're working on here in California this year. And just to sort of share an example of a big win, one thing I've learned is that advocacy is very much like running a marathon. It can take a very long time to get a piece of policy across the finish line. But this past year, that marathon has sort of been coupled with 2 serious reflections. One is the impact that systemic racism has had on health inequities in our country, both with relation to COVID and with cancer, and also the impact of the pandemic on cancer screening rates. And a lot of people stopped getting their cancer screenings during this time, and that is going to increase significantly late stage diagnosis, and we're very concerned about that. So we were really surprised that we were able to actually get this bill across the finish line in less than a year, which is unheard of. So the bill that you see on the screen in front of you is the Henrietta Lacks Enhancing Cancer Research Act. Is anyone familiar with Henrietta Lacks? No, I see some yeses, some nos. So Henrietta Lacks was a Black woman that was diagnosed with cervical cancer last century, and her cells from her cancer were taken without her knowledge and used because they replicated in a petri dish, which scientists had been unable to replicate at that level. And because of that, they were able to use her cells in multiple different research projects. And so many, not just cancer research, but all types of research for nearly every major research project in the nation today are using her cancer or her cells still today. But again, this was done without her knowledge. And so this particular bill was named in honor of her to recognize that something was done without her permission, and sort of the impact that had on her life and her family's life, and how medical ethics is really important in the research and the work that we're doing. This particular act addresses the equal access to clinical trials for people from different ethnicities. So 20% of all clinical trials to this date do not pass it out of the clinical trial phase because of insufficient patient enrollment. And this is exactly what Megan was talking about in the beginning with the donor be the match, right? So not having enough representation in that donor base impacts access to what's needed for their treatment. And the same as in the clinical trials. We need to have representation from all of the different ethnicities that we have so that those treatments can, pass out of their clinical trial stage and be used in the real world. So this bill will do research to find out what is what is causing that barrier and how they can correct it. Some really simple ways that you can do advocacy from home are through social media. And so I wanted to throw our 3 social media accounts up here and encourage you to follow those. A lot of times when we have opportunities to take advocacy, we will post them on these accounts. And sometimes that ask is like 30 seconds to send a message to your congressman, to your senator, to a local city council person, and it literally takes 30 seconds to do that. But there can also be bigger requests. And maybe we can drop these handles in the chat box or something later for folks. But in addition to those quick ways that you can engage, these are other ways that I would encourage you to get involved in advocacy. You can become an ACS CAN member, and membership is $10, and that is what we use to fund our campaigns for these different issues. You can become an ACS CAN ambassador, that should say, or an ACS ambassador. And you can sign a petition. You can share your own story. And a lot of times we have media that reaches out to us. So NBC or ABC News might contact and say, I would like to do a feature story on this particular type of cancer. And so if I know that I have somebody in my story database that fits that, I'll contact CBS and say, Becky Wallace would be a great fit. She wants to share her story with you. And then you get to go on the news. And you can do all of these things by visiting fightcancer.org/California. And also, I'll have my email at the end, and you're always welcome to reach out to me personally. Other opportunities to get involved are sort of year-round. We have an ambassador summit training that happens in early spring every year. As I mentioned, our Day at the Capitol is happening this year on April 6th. We do a Lights of Hope throughout the summer, very much like the Luminaria ceremony, but it happens in Washington, D.C. We have our ACS CAN California Legislative Awards reception, where we present awards to California lawmakers who are doing good work to support cancer patients. Our National Leadership Summit and Lobby Day is when we advocate at the federal level, and often we travel to DC. So fingers crossed, things will return to normal quickly, and we might be able to do that this year. And then we have a research and health equity policy coming up this November. So these are all kind of dates you can mark on your calendar. And again, there's my contact information. My email is just mary.kemp@cancer.org. And I want to open it up for questions. And there might be questions in the chat, so I'm going to stop sharing so I can see. Oh, thanks for posting the handles in the chat.
Yeah, just to reiterate, if any of you guys have questions, feel free either to unmute and raise your hand or just type them in the chat.
How many?
I have a question.
Oh, go ahead, Megan.
I have a question. So are there any other legislative policies that the ACS CAN has kind of implemented besides the ones that you mentioned in the presentation?
Yes, there are. This is probably 2 or 3 years ago now, we passed the STAR Act. It's the Childhood Cancer Act. And what it did was it designated funding to rare childhood cancers and to support minority children impacted by cancer. Those 2 specific things. We also just passed the Removing Barriers to Colorectal Cancer Screening Act at the federal level. And what that does is it addresses the copay that patients were having to pay. When you go in for a colonoscopy, if the doctor finds a polyp, they just cut it out and remove it, and then you're without cancer. But what was happening was people would wake up to surprise bills because it changed from being a screening to being a diagnostic. And so they were being charged. And so a lot of patients started saying, I don't want to go for my colonoscopy because I don't want to wake up to a surprise bill when I don't know how much it's going to be. So those are two examples. We have 4 that we're working on at the state level right now. One that is a colorectal cancer bill. We're working on a school nutrition standard bill, a soda tax preemption bill, and an oral chemotherapy medication recycling bill. So 4 different, very unique bills.
Thank you so much for
Yeah, you're welcome.
question.
Yeah, I had a question. I was just wondering, like, how much has COVID kind of affected the work that you guys do at ACS CAN, specifically with things like advocacy and policy reform?
Yeah, that's a great question. I almost thought when the pandemic happened that our work would slow down, but actually what happened was it ramped up more than ever before. So where there were a lot of scenarios where there wasn't work for people to do, it felt like we were needed everywhere. One of the issues that I noticed locally is that that there is a connection between lung health and whether you acquire COVID. And so a lot of local city councils were finding that it was important to address lung health in their communities. And one of the ways that's sort of risen to the surface is through smoke-free multi-unit housing. So in many communities, the individuals that live in multi-unit housing tend to be lower income individuals, and they don't have access to easily move to a new location to buy a freestanding home separate from others. And if they live in a space where others are allowed to smoke, that smoke travels through the ventilation system into their unit. And whether they are a smoker or not, it can impact whether they get cancer, and it can also impact their lung health and increase the likelihood that they might get COVID. So that was one of the major shifts where we hadn't seen cities really caring about that at all to suddenly caring about it a whole lot.
Okay, thank you guys so much. As Mary Kemp mentioned earlier, if you guys have any other questions about anything, you guys can use the resources that we've been posting in the chat, or also reach out with the email. And we'll be sending out all this information after today's meeting through an email to all of you guys. So yeah, just thank you so much for that presentation. We all learned a lot about ACS CAN and empowering people to share their stories and impact legislation, as well as information on cancer research funding and clinical trials, etc. And now we'll be moving on into our Jeopardy game, featuring fun facts and trivia about cancer and some of the work that ACS does.